I will start my speech in three, two, one. The crux of the human experience lies vitally in the emotions that grip one's heart and the hearts of others in the same vein. The sharing of emotion is what makes human relations and, by extension, society possible. A heightened sense of sharing will only augment the human experience instead of detriment it. But first, if you point the setup panels. Firstly, on the status quo of human understanding. People avail but fail to understand one another all the time. And this is what we see in the world. Lovers, parents, children, colleagues, friends, no matter how close they are, understanding another separate individual is hard. Someone that is without you. This is because our each internal experience is inalienable to one another, especially if you have a certain precondition, like autism, for example. Misunderstandings, stress, fights, undue tension happens. Sharing emotions goes beyond all the pretension that might happen in the regular world without such methods of transferring emotion, by way of having to understand one another through stilted words that are hard to construct, words that are too abstract to actually convey the feeling of human emotion. But what is the main countermeasure in today's world, in the world without emotional transference? It is empathy. And what is empathy? Empathy is a human tool that tries to bridge the emotional gap. And this is my second point of setup. This measure is flawed and ineffective because A, it depends on the other party's ability to empathize rather than feel for themselves, but also B, the full breadth of emotion won't be conveyed by you, even though you work hard to then convey it through words, through actions, through emotion, through facial expressions, through body movements and whatnot. Not all people are expressive. Not all people are emotional. Not all people are poets, people that can string up words that evoke emotion. It is hard to do. Thirdly, empathy is an existing measure that is utterly shoddy, especially in an increasingly callous world driven by social media, capitalism, and whatnot, that continually shreds upon our sense of empathy. But a point of framing panels. This is an ideal world motion or assuming if motion, but the actors being humanity as a whole. Therefore, in order to discuss this motion, we must consider both the nature and or goals of humanity. One, they are social creatures. Secondly, they want relationships. And also thirdly, they will try to understand one another for relationships. Therefore, they're a possessor of love. They have a certain sense of amicability towards other people or other individuals of their species, that is humans, or even other individuals outside of their species, animals, for example. Therefore, humans will gladly feel the sadness and pain of others if it means they'll understand them better. And so, in our case, it is probable for them to actually receive these transferals willingly, right? We will demonstrate or prove two things. One, that empathy is a failed mechanism that must be excised lest human relation becomes improbable. Secondly, that the concept of emotional sharing is in line with the uses of emotion. How will this work then? How will emotional transference in our ideal world work? One, it needs to be consensual. It is willing, needs consent before the transfer happens. You can't force people to receive your emotions in our world. Secondly, the party receiving the emotion will feel it like how the original party feels it without any exceptions or exemptions. So the things that you cannot convey through words alone can be conveyed through emotional transference because the other party is literally feeling what you feel at the moment or a certain emotion you are feeling at the moment in a single instant. Thirdly, the original party's emotion does not disappear because, yeah, in the end, the original party still possesses those emotions and the triggers those emotions in the first place. But also, thirdly, regular empathy still exists on our side, and so there is still that safety net. So, second point of arguments, 2 points of arguments. A, on the improbability of true heart to heart. Empathy realize panels that firstly, empathy is too relative by each individual's abilities and pre-existing conditions. It has conditions like autism, ADHD, NPD, deafness, things that inhibit communication either physically or emotionally or even mentally, right? Secondly, not only is it hard, some people simply does not or cannot feel a high sense of empathy to one another through no fault of their own. People with mental disabilities, people with mental conditions, people with other conditions in their life, right? These things that they cannot control. Thirdly, or they can't make other people empathize with them because they cannot convey their true feelings through words eloquently, and they don't have the ability to, they don't have the cognizance to, right? And this is a crisis. Imagine that you're an autistic person, panels, struggling to communicate to others your feelings and internal experience and becoming isolated because of it. How would you feel? No one can feel what you feel. No one knows what you feel because you can't convey it. You're trapped inside your own self bubble. Or someone deaf that can't make their loved ones understand them because they struggle with sign language, for example. You become extremely isolated because people cannot understand what you are feeling at the moment. Not to mention the decline of community and empathy in modern times. For example, narcissism, individualism, system beset by social media that invokes this kind of sense of personal image, that presents personal worth, that is beyond empathy, that is something that is that fosters this sense of ego in our community and in our society. But avoid comparison panels. On their side, the worst case is empathy is a failure that is being dismantled by society itself, but also inherently ineffective. But also, even if this is not the case, on their best case, empathy simply cannot reach certain demographics or people through no fault of their own with their pre-existing conditions. But on our side, our best case is human relations becomes ludicrously easy because you can understand and actually feel what the other person is feeling right at that moment. But even if not, empathy is still more accessible because people that have pre-existing conditions does not have to fight for to be understood. But in my second round of argument on augmentation of the efficacy of emotions, emotion serves a few functions. One, internal self-indicator. Secondly, external expression. Thirdly, and human connection. Emotion transferal serves all those functions even more than the current status quo of empathy and the current status quo of having to use clunky words or having to use clunky body languages, where people struggle with those all of the time with all different kinds of disorders and conditions. It's one, firstly, on the point of internal self-indicator, how we evaluate how we ourselves feel. Sometimes, panels, we can't comprehend our own emotions ourselves and need the help of others, right? At that point, for example, you go to a therapist and you try to work out through your emotions. But in the end, the emotional barrier, the communicational barrier between you and your therapist can be too high for you to then achieve a certain sense of recognition of your own emotions, because no one else can feel your own emotions. You have to feel it for yourself, and sometimes you don't have the faculties to feel it for yourself. You don't have the faculties to comprehend why you are feeling A, B, C, D, and you have to ask other people. Other people simply, just because they don't feel how you feel, they might struggle through it a bit, and it costs a lot of time and money, right? So if we can then share our emotions to certain peoples, to certain experts, to our loved ones, people that we trust, they will be more helpful. They will be able to help us more than if they were to make us say the words or guess our emotions, right? But secondly, your expression is more understandable and recognizable if you try to express it externally, right? Especially because then the other people will then really understand what you're trying to express out there. But also, thirdly, making people get it in human connection is very easy if we have human connection and if we have emotional transference, which I explained before, that not replaces, but is superior to empathy, right? It doesn't destroy the essence of emotion, it amplifies it. But point of weighing panels, yes, maybe things between two peoples or two individuals will be more intense and make people instead shy away from emotional confrontation and emotional connection. But this is worth it for the people who can handle it and the people who really, really need to communicate their emotions because they cannot otherwise. Besides, it's not like regular empathy is at the table, and it's not like people can force their emotions on other people and transfer onto them without their consent or will. And therefore, people that does not choose to then receive or transfer any emotions can still exist on our world. And therefore, any point the opposition tries to make that this will, lead to a destruction of emotional casualness or some kind of casual communication is absurd and also vetoed. And therefore, I rest my case.